Okay, we're going to reset now as we get ready for our program today. Our Rotary Club has always been willing to take on interesting topics, and this is obviously an interesting topic that has a lot of attention, so we really appreciate you all being here. Matthew, would you come forward? Matthew will be our Master of Ceremonies and our moderator today. Matthew is also the brainchild of this idea, and so we're going to reset a little bit. We're going to take ourselves off the front table. We're going to ask the panel who is on Matt's panel. Would you please come forward to the front table, please? Okay, just a few housekeeping rules. Obviously, any question that's on your mind is obviously a good question. We want to hear it in a respectful way. Brad, where are you going to be? So when you have a question, Brad is you're going to come up and give Brad your question. He has the microphone so that we can record your question. And so if you'll just remember to see Brad as the questions come forward, that'd be great. Matthew, without any further ado, turning the program over to you. Thank you. Sure.
A few things today. Thank you for all being here. Wanted to bring up our Rotary president, Greg Gardner, is a partner in Riverbend Cellars, a local winery. The Rotary Club of Eureka recently took a tour of Barbara Groom's Lost Coast Brewery expansion and had a weekly program there. A local Humboldt entrepreneur recently started Humboldt Vodka out of Fortuna. What do all these products have in common, besides being a drug that can be addictive, killing an estimated 50,000 Americans each and every year, and almost half the arrests in Humboldt County on a daily basis are alcohol-related, as our law enforcement people tell you, between drunk in public and driving while intoxicated. Alcohol was made illegal in the United States under the 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution, or the Volstead Act, from 1920 to 1933. It was only 81 years ago that our sheriff would have arrested you and our district attorney would have prosecuted you for buying, selling, or transporting alcohol. Things changed, and that was called the 21st Amendment, which repealed prohibition. The Center for Disease Control estimates that tobacco causes an estimated 5 million deaths per year, 500,000 deaths in the United States alone. I would have had a cigarette packet here as a prop. However, I couldn't find anyone who smokes anymore. Times have changed, or as one of our doctors in the group said, they're all dead. Tobacco takes an estimated 10 years off your life. For this, tobacco farmers get tax breaks. Tobacco executives receive million-dollar salaries, bonuses, and stock options. Prescription painkillers, what we call opiates, are the latest growth business in drugs. Vicodin, Oxycontin, Percocet cause an estimated 15,000 overdose deaths per year, more than heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine combined. Law enforcement are now calling opiates heroin light. What do all these drugs have in common, alcohol, tobacco, and opiates? They're all legal, regulated, controlled, and taxed, which brings us to our subject today. There's one business in Humboldt County, a $4 billion with a B dollar business in Humboldt County alone, that is not regulated, not controlled, and not taxed. One of the biggest lobbying efforts for the legalization of cannabis is coming from a strange source, the National Football League. Nate Jackson, retired from the Denver Broncos, recently wrote a book called Slow Getting Up. Through a 6-year NFL career, he had the following injuries, and I'm going to quote from his article in last week's New York Times where he wrote an op-ed. I broke my tibia, dislocated my shoulder, separated both shoulders, tore my groin off the bone, my hamstring off the bone twice, broke fingers, ribs, tore my medial collateral ligament, suffered brain trauma. Most players in the NFL have similar medical charts. Each and every one of them needs medical marijuana. Oregon and Alaska have cannabis on the ballot this November. There's only one state on the Pacific coast, quote, the progressive state, that it's not legalized. We all know what's coming. 2016, 2018, legalization of cannabis is going to be here. We wanted to have a forum today to talk a little bit about this. So I'm going to ask each and every one of our distinguished panel of guests just to come up, give a brief overview of who they are and who they work for. And if anyone wants to ask questions, start lining up on the side there. This is your program. Thank you. Oh, and I expect the alcohol to be here when I come back.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Downey, your elected sheriff. I'm also a member of this Rotary. I'm honored to be here. This is quite a subject. I've been in law enforcement over 30 years, and I have been, so to speak, in the marijuana business for probably most of that time. I have a very big background in marijuana eradication. Over the years, I've seen it. I've seen all aspects of marijuana cultivation, possession for sales. I've been dealing with the 215 issue for the last 17 years, something our state legislators have been burying their heads in the sand on, unwilling or unable to make any kind of legitimate argument for or against, or come up with something that law enforcement can work with statewide, not just locally. And I've come to the realization over the years, you know, we live in a free country. I'm not going to tell you my personal views on what I think of marijuana, but I think people should be able to make a decision as to what's best for them. The only place I would stop is when it would put some type of a burden on the country itself in light of health care issues, that type of thing. I'll tell you what I have seen and what doesn't work, and that is the way we're dealing with the marijuana issue today in California. I've realized there's only two ways to deal with marijuana in California at this point. Number one, you decriminalize it or legalize it in some regard. Or number two, you fully fund the enforcement of the laws that are on the books. This in-between stuff that we've been doing for the last 17 years is not working. And it has become more and more complicated and tougher for the officer on the street to deal with. And there needs to be something positive, something intelligible that comes out of this this discussion. And I look forward to 2016. I told you I wasn't going to tell you how I feel about marijuana personally, so I'll leave it at that. But there has to be something beyond this, because this is not working. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Kevin Jodry. Thank you for inviting me here today. I am the director of Wonderland Nursery in Garberville, which is a medical marijuana dispensary. I'm also the cultivation director. I've been involved in cannabis for decades. I was actually involved in international drug interdiction at one point when I was in the Coast Guard. So my experience with cannabis are unique compared to a lot of people. But as Sheriff Downey so eloquently stated, there has to be something that takes place with what we're doing so that we either know how to behave and how to proceed. We have such an incredible opportunity with the medical advances that we see with cannabis that to not be able to go that route and to look at it objectively is a crime. But at the same time, the enforcement of the situation has to be regulated. You have unregulated production of a product that in any other industry wouldn't take place. And so hopefully this discussion today, we can try to figure out what is some of the concerns and how do we help. And if there's ever anyone that has questions about cannabis, you always feel free to contact me if you want to get any information. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Natalie DeLapp. I'm the director of EPIC, the Environmental Protection Information Center. EPIC is a conservation organization that works to protect and restore the forests, water, and wildlife of Northwest California. And as many of you know, our forests, our wildlife, and our water is being directly impacted by unregulated and oftentimes illegal cannabis production. This is stuff that's happening on our federal lands, trespass grows, people using poisons and rodenticides and fungicides, all the ides in our federal lands. They're trespassing onto private industrial timberlands, Green Diamond, Humboldt Redwood Company, Mendocino Redwood Company. People are trespassing onto private land. We're seeing illegal subdivisions and straws right down into creeks with no water storage. And we're seeing a lot of really egregious impacts that we cannot let happen to our community. This area is suffering from unregulated production, and we are working and attempting to work with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to give them the support they need to be able to enforce the laws. We're working with the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board to see how we can get these water diversions permitted so that we know what is happening on the ground, so that the water allocations are not just, we don't know what's going on. And so we need to create a regulatory system that's going to both allow the growers themselves to come out into the sun and be respected and embraced by our community if they're doing things right. So I'm really glad to be here today. From the environmental community, I'm happy to participate with this conversation, and I'm really glad that it's happening. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Maggie Fleming, and in June I was elected the next district attorney of Humboldt County, so I'll be taking that office in January. I have over 25 years as a prosecutor, so I have seen a lot of significant changes in how California has treated marijuana, from the early days when it was a prison commitment if someone was caught with even a small quantity of marijuana, up to now where we have medical marijuana and all of that has involved those changes. I agree wholeheartedly with what's just been said, and that is that the biggest impact to our community, to our county, has been the environmental problems that we've seen. And so moving forward, I think that's got to be our priority, that the regulations and enforcement have to deal specifically with how are we going to deal with the problem in our community, specifically the water use as well as the land use, and then also to look at what will be involved with the regulations and who will be responsible for that enforcement. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Marks, and I am an organizer for California Cannabis Voice Humboldt. I'm also an elected official thank you. I'm also an elected official with the Humboldt Bay Harbor Recreation and Conservation District as a commissioner. I'm also a director with North Coast Rail Authority, and I'm also on the Humboldt Domestic Violence Services Executive Board. So I have been involved in this community, and of course cannabis has touched me as it has anybody else in this room right now. What I was hired to do was to facilitate a process where we can create an ordinance that would be good for Humboldt County and help the growers who want to be responsible and try to, like Sheriff Downey had talked about decriminalizing the thing and try to become and legitimize the process. And so the people out there who are cannabis growers for medical purposes can actually be brought into and humanized by this community instead of ostracized. And so, like I said, I'm excited that we're going to have a stakeholders meeting on October 22nd. There will be a lot of people in this room that will be invited for that process, and that's to actually create an ordinance on the run that hopefully we can pass through the Board of Supervisors to, before 2016 and hopefully be on the forefront instead of the back front. So thank you very much.
Wow. I'm Luke Bruner. I am the treasurer of California Cannabis Voice Humboldt. I'm one of the two founding officers of that. I'm also the business manager at Wonderland Nursery. And a thing that's really important to me today is the matter of community integration. And it's a little overwhelming to me, and I can think of no better place for this sort of meeting to take place at than a Rotary Club. But going forward, Humboldt County is going to go through a process of integration and a process of change. And we have an opportunity, I feel, to provide leadership to the rest of the state of California on how to go about doing these things, how to get it right with the environmental matters, how to get it right with the regulatory and the zoning and the business matters and the nuts and bolts of all of these things, but also how to get it right to bring a community that has in a lot of ways been in the shadows and been hidden into the light and to be full and active participants in our society. There's a lot of people in the cannabis community that are ready for change. They want to be able to go to Rotary meetings, and they want to be able to go to school board meetings, and they want to be proud of what they do, and they want to showcase it to their community and to tourists and to camera crews and have marketing and do it in a safe and responsible way. I think a key component of that is incentivizing legitimacy. And part of that incentivization is social incentivization. And I really want to thank the Rotary for allowing this to happen today, because this is socially incentivizing the cannabis community to be best actors and to be a part of the world that you guys have been helping to build. So thank you for having us today.
So, Sheriff County, you start out by saying that sort of we have two options. One is some sort of legitimizing, legalizing, and the other one was fully funding the enforcement of existing laws. Can you describe what is meant by fully funding? What might that cost in dollar terms? And what might that look like to those people who are living in the community? And what might that do to, quote, solve the problem, if there is one?
Well, that's a good question. I never really said it would solve the problem, the fully funded. Things have changed so much over the years. There was a time when this county had a very vibrant eradication team. I was part of it at one time. We had 5 deputies and a sergeant assigned to full-time eradication of marijuana in Humboldt County. At that time, the state of California took marijuana cultivation very seriously. This was 30 years ago. Today, that's not the case. Today, you look at the state of California, Department of Justice, Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement, they have pretty much gutted their program. We were told about 2-3 years ago that the Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement for the Department of Justice was pretty much a done deal. We were no longer getting the support we needed, not only with marijuana, but other drugs as well. So to revitalize a program like that and to aggressively enforce the laws that are on the books is going to be a very expensive proposition. Because the infrastructure has to be built again. I'll tell you right now, one of the key components to any eradication effort in these rural counties is helicopters. Helicopters are excessively expensive to operate. The other possibility is this new idea of drones. Well, I've already been pretty much told by the people in Humboldt County, no drones. We don't want any drones. An interesting thing about that, they're much less intrusive as far as the noise and that type of thing. But so to revitalize a program that dealt specifically with enforcement of the current laws would be a difficult proposition. But, the main thing right now as sheriff, I am going to enforce the laws that are on the books at this point, until there's some legislative change. And we do that with the best we can. As far as legalization, I cannot dispute what my colleagues have said up here. There is no regulatory scheme right now. Our environment is definitely hurting. It's been the last 4 years that the light kind of clicked in my head, and I have been really championing this thing about what it's doing to our environment, and it is ruining our environment. It is. I think the cost to what's happening to our environment far outspend what it would cost to eradicate marijuana at this point. So that's why I say we have to have some type of a legitimate scheme or idea of how we're going to go forward with this thing, because right now it is a mess.
Before we go to the next question, there's a Firebird parked out front that is blocking some other cars, so hopefully not everyone is driving a Firebird. But if you are, please go out and move your car.
Hi, I'm sure you all know me, Kitty Potterack. I'm a pediatrician in the community, and I'm pleasantly surprised by the topic today. I would have come prepared had it not been for recent life events. But this is something I have been dealing with for decades in terms of the collateral damage that our irrational drug laws have created. I see the damage done to children, because they're victims of a society that is punitive, both to sometimes choices they make later on in life and to their parents. Literally, since I've come here, I've been dealing with one child who has anxiety and depression because of a search and rape on her family. And if you saw this family, they would look like any other middle class, even upper middle class family in any community. And then I have to say as a physician too, in terms of damage done as a substance, alcohol is far more dangerous than marijuana. You know, I've not indulged since I was in college in the 1970s, didn't find it to be all that. But obviously it is part of our culture. And what we're doing is basically burying our heads in the sand and spending lots of money in spite of the data that shows us that we're not accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish, which I think is trying to make our lives better, people safer. I know the two big pathways into substance abuse for children and adolescents is one, self-treatment of mental health conditions. And, oh no, I'm sorry, I thought I told Greg I was going to come up here. So I don't have a question. I have support. I truly have support. This is a pleasant surprise to me and a big concern I have as a physician in the community. I truly am dealing with collateral damage. And a big part of that is the economy, you know, the dollars that are diverted into criminalizing people's choices. You know, if someone chooses to drink wine and the suppliers of that wine are the vintners in Sonoma, it's fine. But if people choose to smoke pot, then the suppliers are the farmers in Humboldt, you know, where it's illegal, suddenly there is a shadow cast on it that doesn't benefit any of us at all. We would be better if we really wanted to deal with substance abuse to invest in mental health care and education, to stop filling our prisons with people who are nonviolent drug offenders, to concentrate on people who truly do pose a threat to our community. And it's good to finally hear this. I'm 54 years old. I never expected this to happen so soon, but I am so glad to see it happening, and I have great faith in the people who are brave enough to come up here and actually say the emperor has no clothes. We need to deal with those. So, no questions, just yay.
Hi, I'm Dan Price, pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Eureka. I've been there for 21 years, and I've been in Humboldt County for 21 years. And I'm glad that you're going to be our new DA, Maggie. But I want to seriously disagree with you, okay? And here's my disagreement. All of you who are growing marijuana are kind of appealing to the fact that you've got some panacea drug here that's not harming anybody because it's no worse than alcohol. To me, that's an interesting negative argument. No worse than alcohol, and maybe doesn't kill as many people as tobacco. Marijuana has been studied recently, longitudinally, in good tests, scientific tests. Recently, many of them have been published by the Harvard Mental Health Review. Okay, these are not local scare tactics. This is good science. I want you all to listen to me. What marijuana does to the brains and mental health of adolescents who chronically use it is, one, it lowers IQ. This has been proved over and over again. And when people talk on the radio, I tend to think, well, you're Exhibit A. You're telling me how smart you are. Because marijuana has done ABC. Two, it creates a very great vulnerability to bipolar disease, manic depressive, serious mental illness. And worse, three, schizophrenia increases, not small percentages. We're talking huge percentage increase in schizophrenia. If you know people with schizophrenia, it's a serious mental illness. It's a psychosis. It's the most difficult of all mental illnesses to deal with, to cure, or to treat. So I just want to dispute this idea that we've got this, you know, the THC levels are much higher than they were years ago when we were using it in the 50s and 60s. And I just want to, you know, Sheriff Downey, I agree with you. What's going on right now doesn't work. I agree with everybody here. The current situation is not working. Either we're going to have laws that we enforce, or we have to liberalize it and legalize it, but it does have to be regulated. Now, here's my question. If you legalize it, as you did in Colorado and Washington, how are we going to keep teens from saying, oh, well, it's legal, it must be good for me? Because I think the facts are clear. It is not good for you. And this is my own little anecdote. I have a cousin who was an outstanding student, you know, an scholar and all that stuff. He only used marijuana. He went into severe depression. It took him years to recover. So how are you going to keep teens from using it if we do legalize it? That's my question.
I would like to answer it since it's open to the panel. What that really gets, among other things, I was one of the stakeholders for SB 1262, which was discussed in Sacramento, because as the sheriff and the DA-elect pointed out, we have nothing at all in California. And he has asked a great question. How do we deal with keeping this away from the hands of the children? How you do that is by moving it into the light of day. With our current situation, Pastor, we are unable to have with our children free and frank and fair and open discussions. We're unable to have serious drug education because cannabis gets lumped in with opiates and with heroin and with cocaine and these other things. We have vigorous and robust programs to educate children on the harms of nicotine and of alcohol, and we see that those usages among teenagers are at an all-time low. And we've achieved great victories with those things. I don't think any reasonable person is proposing that we start giving this to 14-year-olds. If a person is proposing that, I don't think they're reasonable. And I don't think even though there's this stereotype of the drug pusher in the playground, I mean, that's really kind of a cartoon. I don't think that's what the farmers in Humboldt County are looking for. When you have the ability to separate the legitimate actors who are acting in good faith from the illegitimate actors, be they clearing treetops and draining streams or pushing drugs to little kids, then you have the ability to achieve change on those things. I think that the pathway to achieving the result you want is through this route, my friend. Thank you.
So maybe start timing the questions, 2-minute questions, okay?
Mine's very brief. You just touched on it. I'm just curious how legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana will make it easier to detect the growers who are degrading the environment. I mean, what change will it make to make your job easier?
That is really an excellent question, because I've always thought that, or felt that with legalization, there'll still be a black market issue we have to deal with. I think what it will do, and again, I'm not for or against it, but I think that with codifying it and having some legitimate laws on the books, it may help us as far as deterring those who are coming here for pure profit. We have a large amount of growers out there. Many of them are not Humboldt County residents. I'll tell you, I've run across so many different nationalities this last few years that have come here for no other reason than to grow marijuana, and they'll tell you this, make lots of money, take their money, and leave. This whole thing about the financial impact of legalization of marijuana and what it's going to do to Humboldt County, I think we'd probably hit a bump in the road. I think that we have to go over, but I think we've got enough entrepreneurship here in this county that I think we'll overcome that. And again, I'm not saying that that's the best way to go. What I'm saying, though, is that I believe with some type of better scheme than we're using now, it's going to drive the price down even lower than it is. It's going to make it not as profitable as it is, and it's going to tax some of these people that are growing what they hope to be a legitimate commodity. And with that taxation, we'll probably come back to some type of enforcement to where we're better able to get a grip on those that are not following the rules and doing something totally different.
I was too. And I do think that's an issue. I mean, ideally, I think anyone would say we would prefer to see the feds take action first, because any state that legalizes it and goes down this path sets itself up, in a sense, to be a location where those who are going to involve themselves in the black market can grow for profit, because it will always have a higher value in other states that have not legalized it. We're seeing that now. As the price in Humboldt County dropped, and some estimate it's as low as $1,500 a pound now, it still has a very high value out of state. So people who have come here for just greed, simply greed, they don't care about our environment, they don't care about our community, they have no stakes here, are growing huge quantities because then they take it out of state for a lot of money. So the idea, the goal and the hope is that with regulation, and this sort of goes to the question that was asked earlier too about how much money will it take? With regulation, there will be permitting, there will be sales tax, there will be other issues such as that, and that money has to go into enforcement. Because just like any business industry, there must be some checks and balances. Whatever agricultural business it is or any other type of business, if there are ways for people to make a profit by not following the rules, then you have to have someone checking up to enforce the rules.
I want to follow up on the end of what Maggie said, is to continue on that thought, there needs to be fines and penalties. You know, you need to disincentivize doing things illegally. So there needs to be actual enforcement. You know, if we catch you doing what's wrong, you know, and you actually are doing water diversions, serious, serious, serious fines is what will stop. You know, we can criminalize it, or we can put it into civil courts, and you know, keeping it in the civil courts and out of the criminal courts is a step that we could take, and then it's through using additional fines, disincentivizing breaking the law, so using fines.
Okay, I'm going to take a little bit different approach because I want to talk about the incentivized program, and that is creating an ordinance that will actually help bring money into the county coffers through taxes. And if everybody out there has a legitimate grow who does responsible practices and is able to do things in the proper manner and is actually able to help bring money into Humboldt County, I don't see anything bad about that. As a matter of fact, it's going to help clean the environment. It's going to take care of the issues that we have there by giving them a way to do it legitimate. And that's, like I said, creating an ordinance, and we'll start that process October 22nd at the Wharfinger in Eureka.
So you've got this farm, and this farm gets its permit, and it's growing its cannabis. And this cannabis has to go somewhere. And that cannabis is going to go to a dispensary. And every scheme or law that has ever been proposed in the state of California has said that every legitimate and licensed dispensary will have to get its cannabis from some sort of legitimate and licensed farm. So you have your legitimate farmer, and it's going to a legitimate source. And now he has an accountant and a lawyer, because the 10,000 farms in Humboldt County, every single one of them is going to need an accountant and a lawyer. And he says to them at the end of the year, you need to donate some charity, you need to fix this, you need to go join the Rotary, you need to be socially integrated. Really though, you hang out with the people and you influence them over time. And you're going to chat with these people, and they're going to tell you about this guy across the street from them and what he's doing, and that he's not licensed and he's draining the stream. And because that guy is now going to realize that, whoa, that competitor over there has an unfair advantage. He's cheating. If you're a dairy farmer and someone sets up a dairy farm and is not following, I presume there's agricultural health rules, I don't know, vaccinating the cows or whatever you do, the community itself is going to step up and say, that's wrong. As soon as you take away beating people with the stick and you give them the carrot of incentivization, and you add the component of let's get some voluntary compliance over 5 and 10 years, you're going to have 10% of people a year, 20% a year that are going to want to come online, and they're going to want to be the good actors, and they're going to want to do the right thing because it's easier and it'll be more profitable, and you'll get to be part of a community. That's what I think is going to happen with that.
Quick comment and then a question. Comment is, I'm with the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District Board of Directors, and we've seen a tremendous degradation in the watershed of the Mad River. We have asked the Department of Fish and Wildlife to work with us. We've offered resources to try and improve enforcement out in that watershed area, and they frankly don't have the people to do it. It's not just, so it's a real resource issue, which the sheriff mentioned, and we have to handle that side of it too. The other side, my question is, we have a lot of organic farmers in Humboldt County, and a lot of people buy organic food. So the retail end of this has to really look to see where not only are they licensed with a 215 license, but do they have their proper permits? Why are we buying marijuana without looking into seeing whether the people are properly permitted and actually have a permit from the department, from the Water Quality Control Board, and from the Planning Department, the Humboldt County? I'd like the retail cannabis sellers to answer that question.
So just to get the question straight, you're wondering why there is not a method of receiving regulated product?
Yeah, why don't you make that a part of what you do in your purchasing process? Because you're purchasing marijuana, right?
No, we actually don't. I'm unique in the situation where...
People who participate in your cooperative are growing.
No, neither one. Not for me specifically. As an industry, perhaps, but not for my dispensary. We don't work that method. What you have is, in Humboldt County, if you're a dispensary within the county limits itself, there really is no set program for the procurement of it. You can't use USDA organic standards because it's federal, so that no organic word can be applied to cannabis. What the cannabis industry did was it created its own model of a regulatory system called Clean Green Certification, and Clean Green Certification is based off of USDA ag standards. The individual who does the Clean Green is also a USDA inspector. If you are dealing with dispensaries and you have this Clean Green certificate, it allows you to sell your cannabis at a premium. But the issue is that there's no set standard throughout California. It's not in any way standardized. And what is the incentive for the individuals to reveal themselves? That's the issue. What we've used is the stick. We keep talking about incentives, but the stick has been the incentive. It didn't do a very good job. If one was able to say, if you operate under a standard where your water usage is somehow determined to be fair, your standards are fair.
Why do you not, before you obtain the marijuana, ask the producers to show you their land use permit?
They can't. There is none. But there is none right now. There is no set. I understand, but there is no.
They will do it legally. They will get a water.
You're asking me as if I bought the product, but I don't. I know, but you're asking me to speak for myself and for the industry, and we're two different people. We don't purchase cannabis from anyone, so therefore it's a moot statement. But the second part is, why don't people go through the regulatory process to buy cannabis? Because there is no set regulatory process. There is no guidelines in place right now. And that's the issue. If there was, it would be very simple, but there's none. Thank you.
We have 8 minutes left, and in order for this to get complete, we have to keep our questions short and our answers just as short. Okay? Thanks.
No pressure. Well, my name is Natalie, and I'm running for City Council here in Eureka, so I have a lot of interest in economic growth for Eureka. And I'm wondering if you can speak to the other ways that we can see economic growth and job creation here in Humboldt, and particularly in the city of Eureka. You've already spoken to taxes and some of the other ways that we can see revenue generation, but I'm wondering if you can expand on that a little bit. Thanks.
I'd love to talk about making money. Hey, Eureka ended its dispensary ban, but there's still no dispensaries. What if exactly what the gentleman just proposed? What if some of you entrepreneurs got together and raised, I don't know, probably cost $1 million, open up a nice, because our dispensary is clones only. You can see our flyer, we're clones. And then you only obtained your cannabis from people that did that. And then that was part of your whole marketing ploy. And it was nice, and you showcased this. And the people that come in on the cruise ships get to go to an upscale dispensary, not a gangster dispensary. And they get to then, maybe they get a little high and they go spend a lot of money on food. And they go, what? No, really? And they listen to the symphony, and you make it a tourist destination. You have a mecca of those things available to you. We have a whole underground culture here. We threw a lot of you folks, I don't need a microphone. A lot of you folks saw about where this is our dispensary. We're clones. We sell plants to the farmers. And then you saw the Golden Tarp Award on the back. You know, we threw a little party. You know, we got together. We brought some tourists to town. We put some heads in beds. We celebrated our culture. It was a great time. You have all sorts of niche products. We have, 130 unique microclimates in the county. Each microclimate grows different cannabis. Imagine if, we had appellation zones, just like Willow Creek has for wine. So those are some of your routes there. Sorry, boss. I love talking about money.
And just so everyone knows, too, some cities have done this. Oakland was the leader in this. Approximately 2006, they started taxing their dispensaries. 2009, the voters in the city of Oakland voted to increase the tax. It's now at 18%. So dispensaries in Oakland have to go through the permitting process. They have to have a sales license. They go through the State Board of Equalization. And 18% of their gross receipts are returned to the city of Oakland in the form of sales tax.
Hello, my name is Matt Heath, and I'm a candidate for Second Assembly District here. And I want to say that it's, first of all, thank the Rotary for having this. It's an outstanding venue to have this, and for the stakeholders and law enforcement that are here. This is something that needs to take place. Quick question that I do have. I have pledged when elected into the Assembly that one of the first things I would do would get law enforcement and the stakeholders together in the North Coast to come up with something that the state legislature can pass. And I'd like for some of you maybe to comment, what would you like to see in a legislature out of Sacramento that would deal with taxing, regulating, and dealing also with the trespass grows and the water diversions and the pollution of the ground? Thank you.
Simply put, no one keeps standing up. Cannabis is agriculture. Once you kick this into the Department of Agriculture, folks, you treat it like growing almonds, which use 10% of California's water, by the way. And you have a way to deal with sprays. You have a way to deal with the environment. Cannabis is agriculture, not a crime. You fix that, a lot of the pieces going down the road start to fix themselves.
All right, my name is Thomas Edrington. I own the Arcata Holistic Health Center. I'm also an industry observer. Given that we've seen research in things like opiate use and death decrease in states that have decriminalized and legalized marijuana, that teen use has dropped, state funding, medical use, all this research is coming out now that this is that certain states have decriminalized and legalized. What I really want to ask is how can we set Humboldt up through this process in order to be the source of that research, as well as other secondary industries that come out of cannabis? Scientific testing of the product, research, medical research, processing. How can Humboldt County, through this process, adopt the secondary industries that come along with cannabis cultivation?
I don't know. I'll tell you why. We still have the sleeping dog that has not been answered, and I think Maggie touched on it. And that is, nationally, marijuana is not legal. It has to be a national referendum, to put it plainly. I mean, you talk about either one of us, our oath we take is the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of California. But we also we don't enforce federal law, but we have to adhere to federal law. There's a real issue there, and I'll go back to Mike Thompson. I met with him about 3 years ago regarding the trespass groves and the environmental issues, and he was just disgusted by it. This is 3 years ago. He said, you know, Sheriff, he said, problem is, in my lifetime, I'll never see it legalized nationally because of the center part of our country. He said that we have legislators who will not. I mean, in Missouri, you're going to go to prison if you have an ounce of marijuana or a joint in your car. They will not go with it. Now, I'm not saying that this idea is doomed, but I'm saying we have got to have some type of a national referendum that's going to also propel this into the future, because we do have a problem there. Washington and Colorado the feds have not taken any stance on yet. And I'm not saying they are. Maybe that's a test. Maybe they're watching those states to see how they go. But we all saw what happened with 215 in California. We are still being urged by the federal government at the local levels to enforce marijuana laws. California, or Washington and Colorado, as yet I haven't seen a great pushback. So we're still treading in this unknown out there. Anything to add to that? Did I get it?
Well, we've reached the end of our program, so it's been a very interesting program. I think we could have used another 2.5 hours without any difficulty. I wanted to thank all of our visitors, and particularly our visiting Rotarians this week. And I wanted to remind all of our Rotarians to bring a friend to lunch and our membership drive for this next year. We really appreciate that. And then, as always, I try to end with a thought for the week. So I was looking this week, and I got one from Pope Francis. He had a question. Here's what he said. I think a question that we are not asking ourselves is, isn't humanity committing suicide with this indiscriminate and tyrannical use of nature? On that, we're adjourned.